So this is my actual stock portfolio, and in this video, we'll be going through my top 9 stocks to buy now. And we'll look at these top stocks in 5 different categories: quantum computing, AI, cybersecurity, as well as 2 stocks that look massively undervalued by the market, and 1 stock that's growing at an accelerating rate, but the market is completely missing it. To start off, let's see how my portfolio is done and to put my money where my mouth is. So year to date, even though the year just started, my portfolio is basically flat. It's up a tiny bit, but over the last 2 years, it's up around 175%, although it's had a lot of ups and downs during that period. My stocks sometimes see big drops and then big rises like this because they are fairly volatile, and also because I am exposed to a fair amount of sector risk. I prefer investing in what I know, and since I work as a solution architect for Fortune 500 companies, technology is what I know best. And for everything else, I have index funds. So as we go, I'll show you exactly how much I have invested in each stock, and at the end, I'll reveal every single stock that I currently hold in my portfolio. And as we go, I'll also share with you my 5 biggest investing lessons of the last year. So starting out with a stock that is gearing up for the next great technology race in quantum computing. But unlike the big AI stocks of the last tech trend like Nvidia, this stock is currently trading at a market value of just over $10 billion. So when it comes to a new wave of technology like quantum computing, it's important to look at a company's products and not just their numbers. Massive growth happens when a company has the perfect product in a quickly growing market before that market appears, like Nvidia. So let's break this stock down by first talking about what quantum computing even means, how IonQ is standing out from the competitors in this space, and how we might be able to use past successful tech companies like Nvidia to predict where IonQ's stock price will go next. So focus on quantum computing stocks has been heating up in the beginning of 2025, and for good reason. Quantum computing offers some capabilities that traditional computers simply will never be able to match. So if you already know about quantum computing, you can skip to this point to just see IonQ specifically, but here's a basic breakdown of why it's useful. Traditional computers think by basically using switches that are either on or off, a 1 or a 0. And you can kind of think of these like Lego blocks that you use to build a tower. As you add more and more of these Lego blocks, the tower gets more and more complicated until you can do things like run an entire website on top of them. It's all made up of these tiny Lego blocks of 1s and 0s. But quantum computing is like adding a magical Lego brick that can be a 1, a 0, or both at the same time. These magical Lego blocks, called qubits, allow you to build towers that would be impossible to do using just regular blocks, and you can build incredibly complicated things with it, at least theoretically. See, up until recently, there hasn't been a practical application for quantum technology. Yeah, there's a lot of cool theoretical stuff you could do with it, but you're not going to be using a quantum computer for 99.99% of problems that you're trying to solve, especially because they're extremely expensive, they're not very powerful yet, and you have to keep them at extremely low temperatures for them to even be stable and useful. So most experts don't expect quantum computing to replace classical computing, probably ever, but at least not for several years. What it may be used for, though, are certain applications like cybersecurity, where I won't get into the deep specifics, but basically a quantum computer would be capable of breaking traditional security protections. So from an investor's perspective, this is an area where there's a lot of research and development happening, and once the technology matures fully, there's going to be a lot of money that floods into the space. And as much as you may have seen headlines like this that say quantum computers have solved impossible tasks, most of those tasks are pretty contrived and they're not really useful in the real world, at least yet. But what articles like this do show is that we're getting kind of close. Okay, so let's look at what makes IonQ specifically my top choice for the smaller quantum companies. So IonQ has some pretty big ambitions for their quantum future. The company is partnered with a lot of other big companies in the space, including companies like Nvidia as well as Microsoft Azure, and their claim to fame is their unique approach by using trapped ion technology, which they say is powered by atoms. Here's what that actually means. There's currently 2 problems that people are trying to solve in quantum computing. Number 1 is simply having more qubits at once. This is like building a bigger, more powerful computer. And the second is increasing the reliability of those qubits. Because you're dealing with things on a quantum scale, qubits will often flip back and forth into different states, and being able to control that consistently is a very, very difficult problem. IonQ's solution is to basically take atoms and trap them in a laser cage, kind of like forming a super strong glue that holds everything together. And IonQ's goal is to make a generalized quantum computer that can be used for basically everything, which we can see on their page with their goal of setting up a quantum cloud made for developers, which they partner with other big companies to support. So the big news for IonQ at the beginning of last year was when they achieved 35 algorithmic qubits ahead of schedule, which, if you're someone who follows quantum closely, you'll notice is quite a few less qubits than in a system like D-Wave system. But again, they're building fundamentally different approaches. IonQ is really focused on stability. You really need to be able to use this for any problem in the future. And so they're going to slowly make it more powerful by adding more qubits over time, versus something like D-Wave is razor focused on one type of problem, and so they can expand a little bit faster and just handle the different types of reliability because they're focusing on one use case. And if you're interested in how this whole quantum space is developing, I'll be making a dedicated video on quantum stocks, so make sure you're subscribed for that. But when it comes to quantum, kind of like with early AI, it can be hard for most investors to understand if there's actually value there, which is my main reason for investing in IonQ, is they actually have some numbers behind them. The company recently signed the largest US quantum contract of $54.5 million with the US Air Force Research Lab. The company is partnering with some of the biggest cloud providers in the world, and the company is actually producing real revenue, unlike a lot of these smaller quantum stocks. Now, the revenue's tiny. They made $6 million a year ago, and in their most recent quarter, they brought in $12 million, but they are demonstrating that people are willing to give them money for this technology, which is more than you can say for a lot of stocks in this area. At the same time, the stock is still very risky. The stock's price has increased 300% over the past year, and what goes up very quickly can come down very quickly as well. We have seen some big drops as well as big rebounds in the stock as recently as January 2025. And if we look at the company's Main Street data, we can see they are burning more cash every quarter than the last, and their profitability is negative. They're spending more and more money, which makes sense because they are a research and development company. So I bought a little bit of this stock, 159 shares, just to keep it on my radar. I bought it basically as I was making this video, so no change in that price yet. But the reason I bought this stock is because I think there is some major potential in the quantum trend, even though the technology isn't quite there yet. Which leads us to my first investing lesson that I learned last year. When you're investing in tech, trends tend to drive the market. You'll see a new technology come out, not really move at all, and then it'll suddenly all go up at once. Technology very much follows a hurry up and wait mentality when it comes to the stock market. A lot of times value is not recognized for years, then it's all recognized at once, and sometimes it gets over-recognized and has to correct again. So let's add that as my first item on the 5 biggest investing lessons from last year. But with any trend, there's going to be new entrants to the market, as well as existing companies that are able to adapt to that trend. Remember, NVIDIA was already big in the GPU space when AI came along, so let's now look at a big hardware and software company that is investing heavily into quantum computing, and by some metrics is leading the space. So Google recently announced Willow, their new state-of-the-art quantum chip. And with this chip, they also demonstrated 2 key pieces of quantum: error correction as well as performance. I won't spend too long on this stock because I have talked about them in this video before, but I want to break down exactly what Google is doing with Willow and how this could impact them over the next year as well as the next decade. So Google is focused primarily on building scalable quantum systems. They talk about how they are co-developing their hardware and software at the same time, which makes sense. Google is a massive company, and if they build a cool prototype of a computer, it's not really that useful to them unless it can scale. So the big thing that Google figured out with their Willow chip is a way to make it so you could quickly scale up the size of the chips that you are using in quantum computers. So no longer do you have to manually add new qubits over time. The architecture that they've created is designed to be fairly flexible as well as fairly scalable. Now, it's not supposed to be quite as stable as IonQ. After all, they're not using literal atoms locked in a laser, but that's okay for them because the other big breakthrough they had is developing self-correcting technology. So if something flips accidentally, they can catch that and factor it into whatever they're doing. This solves one of the biggest problems in quantum computing because as you scale up, the errors scale up exponentially as well. So if you can find an error correcting solution that scales up, you can theoretically build very, very large quantum computers. Now, they haven't built a massive computer yet. They have solved some sort of edge case problems, which theoretically wouldn't be possible with a traditional computer, but this really opens up the gates for the first steps into quantum computing. And it was after this announcement that a lot of the quantum stocks started to tick up in value. After all, when you hear statements like, this problem would have taken 10 septillion years to solve on a supercomputer, it makes people think these quantum computers must be really powerful. But again, the first use cases are probably going to focus on security. Now, the reason I want to bring up Google here is because they've just done a really good job of staying on top of whatever the next tech trend is. They were one of the leaders in AI. They are one of the leaders in quantum right now. In fact, you might call Willow a quantum leap forward. Or not. I currently own 123 shares of Google, valued at $24,000, and it's up just under $4,000 overall. Okay, but let's move on from the quantum realm into a space that I know very well. AI, but we're not going to be talking about traditional AI companies. So let's look at two AI stocks that I think are completely under the radar, are not wildly overpriced, and that are executing like crazy in one of the less well-known areas of AI, which will also tie in with my second investing lesson from last year. So Uber, they may just seem like a rideshare app, but they are secretly becoming a powerhouse in AI. So let's talk through 3 ways that Uber is reinventing itself both in self-driving cars and beyond, potentially transforming how businesses and AI itself operates. So first, let's start with Uber's unique self-driving strategy. So unlike Tesla, that is focused on developing their own self-driving fleet, Uber is really focused on partnering with other leading companies in the self-driving space to try to get ahead, including some pretty big hitters like Waymo. And this is a space that Uber has been investing in for quite a long time. Now, in the history of self-driving cars, there's been a lot of different ideas on how this technology could work. But up until now, no one's really figured out how to get everything working together. Tesla is arguably the leader in this space, at least in terms of public awareness, but even their cars are pretty far away from what people would call full autonomous self-driving. And the competition in the space in general is heating up. We're seeing pretty much every major car manufacturer competing, at least in some level, in this space. So while Uber has all these different partners in the self-driving space, probably the most advanced one is Waymo, which, if you look at discourse online, is one of the biggest competitors to Tesla. One of the big advantages that Waymo has is they're using a LiDAR-based system rather than a vision-based system. The whole idea with LiDAR is it can basically scan the environment and see things that the human eye cannot see. For example, see-through foliage. Have you ever been parked on the side of a road and you're trying to make a left turn and there's just a bush sitting right on the edge of someone's yard? And so you inch up forward trying to see around it. You don't see anyone. You get a little bit farther forward and suddenly a car is about to hit you, so you have to react quickly. Those are the kind of edge cases where having something better than human vision could actually be a good thing. And Waymo has been one of the biggest proponents of this technology. Now, at the same time, Waymo has not gotten nearly the amount of attention that Tesla has, both on the positive side as well as the negative side. And so because of this, Uber and their partnerships have been kind of flying under the radar. Now, it hasn't all been smooth sailing. One of their biggest partners was GM, which recently scrapped their $50 billion robo-taxi dream. Now, Tesla's self-driving will absolutely be competing with Uber in this space. But Uber's existing infrastructure, their rideshare users, plus their partnerships in the area do give them some level of competitiveness with Tesla in the space. But even if you are a die-hard Tesla believer, as Uber has learned all too well, there isn't going to be one winner in any given technology. There's room for several top companies at the top, which is great for Uber self-driving, but I actually don't think self-driving is their biggest AI play. See, for years, Uber hasn't just been using AI, they've been building a world-class AI operations platform called Michelangelo, which is designed to scale AI across a global infrastructure. So I can't tell you how many times I've seen an amazing prototype of a product. It looks incredibly good in a video or sitting on someone's desk. But then they go and try to launch that product and everything falls apart when it's exposed to the real world. And that's where a lot of AI tech is right now. There's a lot of promise behind it and a lot of really cool videos, but when you expose it to the real world, a lot of times it's just not that great. And that's because even though it's not as flashy or grab as many headlines, scaling AI is a much harder problem, but it's also an area where you can get a lot more value. And it's right where Uber is playing. As I was diving deep into Uber, I was really impressed with how mature their AI toolkit really is. does. So their Michelangelo platform allows Uber to train, monitor, and deploy their AI models at scale. And on top of that, it can also help with debugging AI. So one of the big problems with AI is if you put garbage data in, you get garbage responses out. So once the garbage goes in, how do you fix the AI model? Well, Uber has a bunch of tools they've built so you can backtrack and kind of rewind the AI to undo that bad input. And they've been using this in their actual products at scale for a very long time. So for example, it helps predict your ETA when ordering food or selecting a ride somewhere. They've also been using it for fraud detection for quite a while. And I really love these quote unquote boring use cases because they're the kind of things that a lot of tech investors will overlook. And because of that, there can be a lot of kind of hidden value there that people aren't investing in when they could. The way I like to think about this is Thomas Edison. So Thomas Edison is famous for inventing the light bulb, but what he should really be known for is inventing the electrical grid to connect everybody's house to a power station, because that formed the basis of all the technology that we use today. Because the magical moment isn't when you invent an AI model or you invent the light bulb. The magical moment is when the city lights first start to turn on. And so Uber's maturity in how to actually use AI applications sets them apart from new entrants into the AI market, which seem to mostly be building chatbots. But before we get into Uber's third and final secret that it's using to uniquely position itself at the top of the AI heap, researching this stock reminded me of a lesson that I've been learning over and over again over the past year, which is to invest in what you know. Warren Buffett calls this investing in your circle of competence. And it's the best way to spot up-and-coming stocks, since if you only invest in your circle of competence, you can see what's hype and where the real value is before the rest of the market. Which is why I'm excited about the third piece for Uber, that they are building the AI foundation through data labeling. Uber's new scaled solutions division targets the new goldmine of AI, data. And I think goldmine is really the right analogy to use here. During the California gold rush, a bunch of people moved to California expecting to get rich by just picking gold up off the ground. But you know who actually got rich? The people who were selling the picks and shovels that the miners were using to get the gold. Uber's new data labeling business is the equivalent in the AI age. Every AI model needs data as the fuel that will help it run. And Uber is basically creating a refinery for that fuel, a refinery for data. So Uber said, well, everyone's trying to sell consumers AI, I'll just sell the data to the businesses trying to do that. A B2B model, which is super smart considering the B2B market is 3 times larger than the business to consumer market in the first place. So fundamentally, Uber is not just a rideshare app. They are an AI company scaling across transportation, real-world AI applications, and even the foundational data economy. And since Uber's stock price may not have caught up with its AI potential quite yet, there could be an opportunity for some investors to get in early. But continuing on this AI trend, we next have a stock that runs one of the biggest social media companies in the world. And the company's stock price is up over 250% for the year, but they may have substantial room to grow from here. So this is a fun one, so let's see if you can guess the stock based on 3 stats. So first off, the company now boasts over 1.2 billion active users, which is close to 4 times as many as Twitter, and the company grew their number of daily active users 47% year over year to just shy of 100 million users, which is almost double the number of users that TikTok has. And on top of that, the company grew their revenue 68% year over year to almost $350 million. So this unicorn of a stock is actually Reddit, the home of Wall Street bets and weird subreddits like Superb Owl. Super Bowl. So similar to Uber, Reddit is an AI play, but it kind of operates outside of the really hyped up area of new AI models. Instead, they're creating the fuel that AI companies will need to survive. But first, let me grab some of my own fuel. So I spend a lot of time researching stocks, so I don't always have time to actually make homemade healthy meals. Luckily, I have Factor. Factor takes the stress out of meal planning and helps save you time. So I'll just pop this into the microwave for 2 minutes, and while that's running, I'm going to talk about why Reddit's stock is undervalued. So Reddit's number of daily active users has been rising exponentially recently. And on top of that, the company's gross profit has also been rising pretty consistently. And this is partly why the stock's price has risen by 240% over the past year. But the company's current valuation is still sitting at around $30 billion. Now this is a company that has more active users users than TikTok or Twitter/X, despite the fact that the company costs around 50% less than Elon Musk paid when he acquired Twitter. And so, given this high growth rate, the fact that they're making more money than ever, and the company is not loaded up with debt, this stock may be one of the cheapest valued social media plays. And saving money is making money, kind of like Factor can save you money. If you're like me at all, sometimes you just don't have time to go shopping, and so you instead end up ordering takeout, which ends up wasting you a ton of money, and it's not that healthy. With Factor, I can pick from 35 different meals each week with keto, vegan and veggie, calorie smart, and other options delivered right to my door. But after valuation, the second piece that is causing the market to underweight Reddit stock is their competitive moat. Warren Buffett wants to own businesses that are like a castle with a moat around them that keeps the competition out. And for Reddit, that moat is all around community and loyalty. Every platform kind of has its own vibe to it. Twitter is for getting mad at people. Pinterest is for women in their 30s to look at dresses they'll never buy. And Reddit is all about deep discussion. It's a really hard thing to copy when the value of Reddit is not in the content like on a platform like YouTube or Instagram, and it's instead in the discussions in the comments below that content. The real value of Reddit is getting instant access to the town square. Kind of like Factor is like instant access to restaurant quality meals delivered right to your door, and they're ready in about 2 minutes. And speaking of, if you're like me and you don't always make time to meal prep ahead of time and you would end up ordering takeout, Factor helps you save all that money that you would spend so you can invest it instead. All right, so let's try this out. We got chicken and corn. Gotta get a bite of everything at once. Oh yeah, that's hot. Oh, that's good. Definitely better than getting Chinese takeout. Head to factor75.com and use code 50FinTech for 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's code 50FinTech at factor75.com for 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. Okay, so I'm gonna finish this and then we'll head back to the desk to hit on the main thing that is causing the market to undervalue Reddit's stock price and potential. So the third piece that the market is missing about Reddit is how they're playing into the AI space. So there's no secret that one of the keys to AI is data. Data is like the jet fuel that allows the AI rocket ship to take off in the first place. And the quality of data matters a lot. We're seeing more and more that new AI models are actually getting poisoned by AI generated content. It makes the AI models dumber. And so there's a big race to get the highest quality data possible. A lot of these AI models are good at a couple things. They're good at answering questions because they're trained on things like Google searches. They're good at generating images because they're trained on things like Instagram or free image libraries. But one area that AI still struggles with is recreating natural human conversation, especially when you have two AIs talking to each other.
Are you an AI?
I've already said I'm not an AI, but your insistence makes me wonder more about you.
So the fact that Reddit has sort of a different culture around conversations makes it a very valuable data set for AI companies to use. Imagine an AI trained on the YouTube comments versus an actual conversation on Reddit. Their abilities are going to come out very differently just based on the data that they're using. And this is one of the reasons that Google signed an exclusive AI licensing contract with Reddit, which is worth up to around $60 million per year. But I honestly think that is undervaluing how much value they're going to get from Reddit in this. And I think that Reddit is going to realize that very, very quickly. Companies like Meta claim that their goal is to make AI more collaborative like humans and help foster human connection. But you're not going to get that if you're just training the data based on arguments people have online. You need to find real conversations that you can pour into these models. And my bet is that Reddit is going to be one of the biggest sources for this data. But enough of the high-flying, super expensive tech stocks. Let's switch gears now to two giant companies that might actually be undervalued at their current price. And yes, I saw some of your comments saying I only talk about pricey stocks, so these are for you. And then we'll get to some of my favorite hidden gem, smaller tech companies after that. So undervalued stocks are those that trade for a lower price than what they're worth. Usually because something about the stock spooks investors and they end up selling too much of it. And these stocks often fall into two camps, either small startup companies that are inventing a new technology, or older companies that have stumbled in some way and have gotten unfairly written off. So the crazy part, I think this next stock kind of hits on both of those. So IBM, yes, the OG computer company that was founded in 1911 and dominated tech for years until it was passed by the modern tech giants. So even though IBM's stock price hasn't had a huge decline recently, this is their entire stock chart dating back to 1985, and it's only increased 678% during that time. For comparison, here's Nvidia starting in 1999 and rising 373,000% during that time. But despite IBM's troubles, here's my case for why this stock might be ready to double in price. And we'll break it out into 3 different sections. So the first area IBM stands out is actually in quantum computing. A lot of people don't know that IBM was fairly early onto the quantum computing research area, one of the first quantum platforms that I ever played around with. Even today, if you really wanted to, you could just go in and sign up for IBM Quantum and start playing around with it right now. They even have their own Python library that you can code in. And one other thing that IBM does really well is they've done a lot of education around quantum. They have an entire IBM quantum learning course that people can take that I think is totally free, where you can learn about how to use quantum as well as the best practices for experimenting with it. This is kind of strange for anyone who thinks of IBM as this old school computer company that's behind the times. But at least in this one area, they're actually quite a bit ahead of the times in terms of their research, which as recently as November 2024, they announced their most advanced quantum computers with the ability to do up to 5,000 2-qubit operations and a bunch of different services built into their platform. One of the areas that IBM has been heavily focused on is the software of quantum computing. And while I don't think the market has put a ton of value on that up until now, this could become a real differentiator in the future. I could even see IBM acquiring some of these smaller quantum computing companies to try to build up their own platform to compete with the likes of Google. I think it's kind of cool seeing these really old school companies like this potentially becoming kind of new school in the relatively near future. The second reason I like IBM is that their stock price hasn't increased as much as a lot of the other tech stocks that we've been looking at. Over the past 10 years, they've only gone up by 50% versus a stock like Microsoft that's up 825%, or Nvidia that's up 31,000%. Now, part of this is because IBM simply hasn't been growing as much as these other companies, but when we're looking at this stock as a potential value play, the fact that they haven't seen a big run up in price gives us some hope that we might be able to buy the stock for cheap. Which leads us to the third point, which is the company's value. The company has seen their annual recurring revenue slowly ticking up over time. It's nothing crazy, but it is moving in a positive direction. At the same time, the company has a price to earnings ratio on a forward basis of 20.7, which is pretty average for the overall stock market, but makes it one of the cheaper stocks in the software and IT services market. I mean, just compare that number to Microsoft, which is trading at a PE ratio of 50% more expensive than IBM. Now, is this the greatest company of all time that is going to dethrone Microsoft, Google, and Amazon? I mean, probably not, but at the current price, I think there is some substantial upside that the stock could see simply by raising up to match the competitors in the space. Which also ties in with my third investing lesson from last year. Sometimes following the crowd can cost you, and often the biggest returns you'll get are by investing against the grain, since that's where the unrealized potential really lies. And that rule has started to play a bigger role in my personal stock portfolio, as you'll see when I share the full thing later in the video. But let's move on to the second potentially undervalued stock before we get to some of those hidden gem companies. So I covered this stock before and I got a fair amount of pushback, but I think that's because I didn't explain the investing thesis for this stock very well. So Intel was historically a chip fabrication powerhouse in the United States. And so at the time, Intel was razor focused on the CPU market, which is basically a type of computing that runs a bunch of very complicated calculations back to back. And their special sauce is they design the chips as well as manufacture them. But more recently, both of those focuses have really come back to hurt the company. So first off, the company kind of completely missed the GPU boat, the graphics processing unit. These are types of chips where instead of doing a bunch of complicated calculations one after another, it could do a bunch of simple calculations all in parallel, like pushing a bunch of pixels to a screen for a game, running blockchain calculations, or training AI. And because Intel kind of missed this whole market, they've seen their stock price decline by almost 50% over the past 10 years, while their competitors competitors like AMD have risen nearly 5,000%, and of course you have Nvidia with their 31,000% gain during that time. And the other big issue that Intel has is every decision they make takes 5 to 10 years to actually become a reality in the world. Because they are actually manufacturing something, it takes a long time to pivot this company. And so the steady decline in their stock price that they've seen over the past 5 years are based on decisions that were made within the company back in 2015. And so when we look at this stock, the question is, what decisions is the company making now that will set them up for success 5 to 10 years in the future? So first off, Intel's CEO has been focusing a lot more on the GPU market. In fact, we're actually seeing these Intel Arc cards starting to be used by certain gamers, especially budget-conscious gamers that want an alternative to Nvidia and AMD. Now, can the company make as strong of a chip as Nvidia? No, and they probably won't for another 2 to 3 generations. But as long as we stick with that 5 to 10 year time horizon, Intel is on the right path in the GPU market. The second good decision that I think Intel is making is they are doubling down on chip manufacturing. The company has a map of 10 construction projects they are currently undergoing, with a significant number of those happening directly within the United States. Now, in the short term, that appears as all costs on Nvidia's numbers. I mean, you can basically see it if we look at their net income, which is like their profit. All of their money is going into building new chip making facilities. So the question is, will all this investment pay off? And spoiler, I think it's going to pay off in a massive way. The US government is currently pushing extremely heavily for funding for the US semiconductor market. Basically, so many chips are being manufactured outside the US that the government sees it as a national security risk. They want some of that manufacturing to be done on US soil, and they're willing to pay for it as long as they're willing to build in the US, and Intel is clearly willing to do that. And even though we're seeing an administration change in the president and we'll see turnover in Congress, I don't think those are going to have a substantial impact in the money the government is going to pour into chip manufacturing, because it's something that affects both sides of the aisle. In fact, a lot of these subsidized chip facilities are going into Republican-owned areas. Now, let's be clear, Intel is not an amazing company. They haven't done a great job over the past 10 years, and with how much the price has declined over the past year, I think there's a certain amount of emotional selling that is happening in the stock, which could give a long-term investor a chance to make some money. But next, let's flip from an underperforming company to two of the best performing companies in an area that will be one of the biggest investing trends of the decade. So cybersecurity, it's one of those technologies that people don't really talk about until something happens, and then that's all they talk about. But with more and more cybersecurity breaches happening every year, it is becoming more and more integral to the conversation every year. Here's a list published by the Center for Strategic and International Studies listing all the major cyber attacks that happened in the past couple years. All of these items that I'm highlighting here are all just in the month of November 2024. And now with new technologies coming out, like AI and like quantum eventually, cybersecurity is going to become more important than ever, because now you could ask an AI to write a virus for you, and it could probably do that. In fact, I'm confident that it could. So this next stock is another one that I own called ZScaler. And ZScaler is a leader in zero trust security. A recent report from Threat Labs called out how 87.2% of all threats hide in encrypted channels. So this is where zero trust security is super important. The traditional security model was to build what's known as a firewall around your network. Basically, as long as the bad guys stay out and you stay in, you're okay. But if a bad guy gets inside your castle, it basically has free reign to do anything. But with zero trust security, every computer, every person, every application on the network has to authenticate anytime it talks to someone else. And what's important about this is the way that applications work in the new cloud native environment, especially with things like remote working and AI-based tools interacting with things. More recently, ZScaler has been building on top of their zero trust capabilities with their new AI 360 platform, which the name is just trying to fit AI in there. But what it's designed to do is give you a comprehensive view of the security of your entire organization, from your users to the actual apps you have running to your actual operations that are happening within your business. The idea is a big company could sign up for ZScaler and they could have one platform that secures their entire business, which, considering how much companies hate spending on cybersecurity, is probably the way that the market is going to move, which is a good place for ZScaler to be, considering they were named as a 2024 Gartner Magic Quadrant leader for Security Service Edge for the third straight year in a row. We'll see if they get the same thing in 2025. One of the big advantages that ZScaler has, which Main Street Data calls out here, is how it's actually more cost-effective for companies to use Zscaler's subscription-based service. I know a lot of users get annoyed with subscriptions, but businesses kind of like having a consistent price they can pay versus the very expensive on-premise and legacy systems that they used to use for security. And the other advantage to this is it makes Zscaler's revenue grow basically like an exponential. And the advantage to this comes in their net income. Now, net income is just a fancy name for profit. And we can see here back in 2022, they hit a maximum negative profit of $100 million. And since then, that number has been decreasing and decreasing and decreasing to the point where the company is about to hit profitability. This is a really big deal because the company is growing extremely quickly, but once they're profitable, they're now available to things like being added to the S&P 500, which only accepts companies that are profitable on paper. And add on top of this the fact that the company is producing an insane amount of free cash flow. I mean, this is actually cash that they're bringing into the business every quarter. It makes me much more comfortable investing in a non-profitable company as long as there's cash coming in, because cash is king. I currently own 82 shares of Zscaler at a current value of $15,500. And even though the company's stock price is actually down slightly over the past year, I'm pretty comfortable with my current position, and I'll show you how it fits in with my full stock portfolio at the very end. But now let's turn to a company that has reinvented themselves again and again, and they are now emerging as one of the leading cybersecurity companies on earth. So this next stock, similar to Zscaler, has seen an exponential growth in their revenue over time, and their stock price has increased by nearly 50% over the past year. But to understand this stock, we really need to understand their story, because this really is a company that keeps on reinventing itself. So it all starts in 2004 at the Stanford School of Business. At that school, two geniuses, Matthew Prince and Lee Holloway, got together to try to solve a question. Where does spam email actually come from? They ended up building a system called Project Honeybot to figure out how spammers were tracking emails. Over the years, they started to build onto this more and more. Lee Holloway's incredible technical abilities combined with Matthew Prince's business acumen allowed them to build to the point where thousands of websites were signed up for their service. Later in 2009, Matthew Prince actually took a break to get his MBA from Harvard Business School. And there he met Michelle Zatlyn, the third of our three musketeers to join the crew. And Michelle added sort of the secret sauce on top of Project Honeypot, not just tracking internet threats, but actually stopping them as well. They put together a business plan called Project Webwall, and they actually ended up winning the Harvard Business School business plan competition. Their mission was and still is incredibly simple: build a better internet. The company ultimately ended up building an entire system for people to run their websites on top of, and a system to protect those websites from bad actors. But then they realized if they were already monitoring the traffic to block bad actors, they could also optimize that traffic for good actors, and the company absolutely took off. But at that point, when the company was at its height, tragedy struck the company. The co-founder of Cloudflare, Lee Holloway, started suffering symptoms of dementia, even though he was only 36 years old. And over time, he slowly lost the ability to work for Cloudflare, had to take a step back, and today he's no longer involved with the company at all. It's a really sad story. There's some really good articles on it, but even as Lee Holloway took a step back, Cloudflare was continuing to take steps forward. The company now, I would consider one of the most innovative companies in the entire world. If we just look at their product suite, they have now transformed from a company that just hosts different websites to a company that has built their own cloud, which would have been unthinkable 10 years ago. And they continue to launch product after product to make their customers' lives better. They have zero trust security products. They have security and performance, networks performance, developer platforms. They even have pretty decent tools in the AI space at this point. I showed in another video how we could use their tools to launch an AI model in a couple seconds. And with that growth in their products has come an equal growth in how much money the company company is making. Similar to ZScaler, the company's revenue has been growing up and to the right as long as the company has been around. And this is also translated to their cash flow, which has recently become positive, and their net income, which has slowly started to go from extremely negative to getting close to profitability. Now, I have owned this stock for a long time, and it has had a lot of ups and downs during that time period. And it's taught me one of my biggest lessons in investing over the past year and the past 10 years as well, which is that when it comes to long-term investing, patience beats activity. So if we look at Cloudflare, I currently own 162 shares worth just over $18,000, and it's up around 72%. But I've traded in and out of the stock during that time, and the shares in Cloudflare that have made me the most money are the ones I just bought early and held through that entire run. There's this really great story of a study they did, I think it was at Vanguard. They looked up all the accounts that had made the most money investing over the past 20 years, and they realized they all had one thing in common. No one had logged into the accounts in years. And when they looked deeper, it turned out a lot of those people had actually passed away. The best investors on all of the platform were the people who forgot they had money there or just couldn't access it in the first place, which I think tells us a lesson about human psychology. When something is going up, we have an instinct to try to sell out, but sometimes you just have to be patient and let your winners run, and they'll do the work for you. Pick a great stock once and don't look at it again. So let's now move on to a stock which didn't fit neatly into one of these other categories, but they are riding multiple different tech trends at once. Data, AI, cloud, they have it all. So nowadays, having a lot of data isn't that valuable in and of itself. What's really valuable is being able to use the data in useful ways. And if you're a big company, uniting a company's applications, their security, and their infrastructure all through a single dashboard where you can understand the data is extremely valuable. And that's what this stock does, which is why they've grown extremely quickly over the past couple years. But more importantly, why their growth has started to re-accelerate recently. So we can see here, the company's revenue was growing up and up exponentially, and then it started to kind of flatten out here around 2022. But since then, the company's growth has re-accelerated up and to the right. And because of that, the company's stock price has followed a similar pattern. So this is a stock that I've owned for a while, and for the vast majority of 2024, the stock price didn't really move. I mean, up and through November, the price had basically gone up 0%. Then it all kind of went up at once. And a big part of this is that re-acceleration in revenue that the company is experiencing. So that stock is Datadog, which I currently own $21,000 in, and before I reveal my entire stock portfolio, we have one more investing lesson to cover. So last year, a continuing investing lesson that I was learning is balancing your risk with safety. I personally think it's okay to invest in these fast-growing, more risky companies as long as you have a safety net, which is why I have 6 months of savings in an emergency fund, along with putting 15% of every dollar that I earn into a tax-advantaged retirement account where it all goes into an index fund, which does not show up on my list of stocks. I think people just do better research and make more money when they have fun with investing. And it's only fun if you have that safety net in place. But here is my full list of my personal stock portfolio, and YouTube's AI thinks that you will really enjoy this video next. I wonder if quantum investing will be like Schrodinger's portfolio. You don't know if you're rich or broke until you check.